In April of 1502, a boy of 15 died at Ludlow Castle, and no one wrote down what killed him. He was Arthur, Prince of Wales, the heir to the English throne. His Spanish bride caught the same sickness, in the same house, and lived. His death would hand the throne to his younger brother and remake England. This is the case of the son who was never meant to be king. In August of 1485, Henry Tudor won the crown of England on a battlefield at Bosworth, where the last king of the House of York, Richard III, was cut down. His claim to that crown was thin. It ran through his mother's family, the Beauforts, a line that had once been barred from the throne by law. So the new king did something careful. When his first parliament met, it declared him king and gave no reason why. Not conquest, not blood. It simply said the crown rested in him and left it there. He even dated his reign from the day before the battle, so that men who had fought for the lawful King Richard could be punished as traitors. He took the throne by winning, and then refused to say so. To close the wound of 30 years of civil war, Henry married Elizabeth of York, a daughter of the house he had just defeated. Lancaster and York joined at last in one marriage bed. Their first son was born in September of 1486 at Winchester, and they named him Arthur. The choice was deliberate. Winchester was the town that Thomas Malory's newly printed book had just called Camelot, and an ancient round table hung in its great hall. To name the boy Arthur was to reach back, over the wars, to a legend of once and future kings. Historians agree the gesture was meant, though Henry never wrote down his reason, and they warn it was a single graceful flourish, not the grand campaign that later writers imagined. The Tudors never claimed to descend from King Arthur. They only borrowed his name. 5 years later, in June of 1491, at Greenwich, Elizabeth of York gave the king a second son. They called him Henry. His birth drew little of the ceremony that Arthur's had. Arthur was the heir, the whole hope of the new dynasty. Henry was the spare. And here is where the famous story falls apart. You will hear that Henry, the spare, was being raised for the church, groomed to become a bishop, even Archbishop of Canterbury. It is one of the most repeated facts about his childhood, and there is no evidence for it at all. It was first written down in 1649, a century and a half after he was born, by an author who admitted he had it second-hand. No source from Henry's own lifetime says any such thing. Look instead at what this boy was actually given. Before he was 2, he was Constable of Dover Castle and Warden of the Cinque Ports. At 3, he was made Duke of York, Earl Marshal of England, and the King's Lieutenant in Ireland. These are the titles of a soldier and a great magnate, not of a churchman. No son of an English king had taken holy orders in 400 years. Henry was not being raised for a pulpit. He was being raised for power. Just not for the throne. In the winter of 1501, Arthur, now 15, married a Spanish princess, Catherine of Aragon. The young couple were sent west to Ludlow on the Welsh border to keep the prince's court. Within 5 months, Arthur was dead. He died at Ludlow on the 2nd of April, 1502, 5 months short of his 16th birthday. You will often hear that it was the sweating sickness. In truth, no one knows. Not a single source from the time names any disease at all. The one physician's account that survives, given years later, called it a wasting illness, something closer to consumption. And Catherine fell sick of the very same thing, in the same house, and lived. A boy of 15 died, and the cause died with him. The blow did not fall once. Less than a year after Arthur, the Queen, Elizabeth of York, went into labour with another child. On the 11th of February 1503, her 37th birthday, she died. The little daughter she had borne died within days. Think of what that year had done. In the space of 10 months, the king had lost his heir and his wife. A father and a husband, twice bereaved, in a time that had no words for grief but prayer. and the whole future of England now rested on one boy of 11. Grief hardened Henry VII. In his last years he grew watchful and close and hard to love, and he kept his one surviving son very near him. Years later, a Spanish ambassador, who was himself being kept from the prince during a marriage dispute, complained that the boy was guarded so closely that he might have been a young girl. Allowed out only through a private door into the park, approached by no one. It is one frustrated man's account, and that same ambassador soon wrote of Henry riding at the tilt in the open day after day. But something true runs underneath it. A father who had lost one son to a sickness no one could name, holding tight to the only one he had left. You do not have to excuse the man to understand the fear. Henry VII died in April of 1509. In his final years he had tightened his grip on his wealthiest subjects, binding them with debts and bonds enforced by two agents, Empson and Dudley. Men called it greed. Historians today see it as much as a way to hold a dangerous nobility on a leash. Either way, it was hated. The old king's heir was now 17, and he understood the mood exactly. Within days he had Empson and Dudley arrested on charges of treason that few truly believed, and in time both went to the block. The new king bought a crowd's love before he had worn the crown a single season. And then Henry VIII did something almost no one expected. He married his brother's widow. Catherine of Aragon had waited 7 years in England. A princess with no husband and little money, while two kings haggled over her dowry and her future. Now the boy she had first met as a child of 10, when she arrived to marry Arthur, made her his queen. They were crowned together side by side in June of 1509. He was young and golden and adored. She was clever and devout and had already survived more than most. For that summer, and for years after it, they were happy. Almost no one watching the two of them crowned would have believed how it would end. Everything you have just heard turned on 2 deaths: a brother at Ludlow, a mother in childbed. Take either one away, and there is no King Henry VIII at all, and Catherine of Aragon lives out her life quietly as Arthur's queen. History is full of these hinges. One death, and everything downstream runs differently. This story turned on 2 deaths no one could stop. My novel, Divorced Not Dead, this time takes 2 later deaths, Catherine of Aragon's and Anne Boleyn's, and asks, what if they had lived? Everything I have told you is what the documents say happened. The book is what might have. You will find it linked below. And if you want more of both, the true history and the fiction that grows out of it, subscribe. There is a great deal more of this to come.